Don't ask the question why, because the question why is a question that no matter what the intent is, it makes somebody anxious and defensive. The answer will never be good enough. A feeling is just a feeling, and a thought is just a thought. Doesn't mean that you have to do anything about that. So the only thing that you can control is what you do. Change is only motivated by negative feelings. It can't be done with positive, because if there were positive things happening in your life, you wouldn't want to change it.
Phillip Quinones is a licensed mental health therapist and relationship coach who specializes in emotional healing, healthy communication, and self-awareness.
He holds a bachelor's in psychology from Georgia State University and a master's in clinical counseling psychology from Brno University.
He's also the author of Marriage Counseling, Expert Advice for a Strong and Lasting Relationship.
What sets Phillip apart is his holistic approach to mental health, focusing not just on symptom relief, but empowering clients with practical tools that they can use the same day that they learn them.
He facilitates workshops on conflict resolution, emotional regulation, and relationship dynamics.
Therapist, coach, author, and someone who's committed to making healing accessible and breaking down the stigma around seeking support. Phillip, welcome to Unplugged.
All right, before we get started, as you all know, I am on a mission to destigmatize the human experience, #BeHuman. I think that being human is really sometimes uncomfortable, awkward, messy, challenging, but sometimes it's super beautiful, healing, and really incredible. And I really just like to use this opportunity to just amplify that for us. So if you have a human moment for us that you would like to share, we would love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. So my human moment would probably be dealing with my dysthymia, which is a word that we define as mild to moderate depression instead of MDD, which is major depressive disorder. And so I've been dealing with depression pretty much kind of since elementary school. And so there have been times in my adult life where usually moments would happen for myself and it would take me into a very dark place. And those things that I can objectively measure would be 16-hour days of sleeping, only eating a Chick-fil-A biscuit, so depressed that even around the time that I was graduating from undergrad, I didn't even really feel like going to my graduation, which I did skip. Not drinking any water, being dehydrated, overly picking my skin, not working out, so losing a lot of weight, not socializing, not getting in contact with my friends, just those type of things. And then I slowly pull myself out of that in those type of moments where I've had those ups and downs. And those are things that I kind of bring to clients' attention very often, is looking at the transition of how they look at themselves objectively on how they got here. Because usually it's not one catastrophic event. There's usually a buildup into what you are experiencing psychologically and through life as a human being. And so, one of the things that you define as being a human being is the ability to feel. And in our experience, most of the feelings that we have are going to be negative fundamentally. So how do you manage yourself most of the time feeling negative? And so pulling yourselves up from that, whether that be slowly getting back into yourself, giving yourself grace of saying, hey, I went down, life is hitting me hard. Everything is piling up. It's stressful. It's overwhelming. It's keeping me at bay. But then slowly have little wins every single day to pull yourself up out of that. And so it could be eating one more thing than you did the next day. It could be drinking one more glass of water that day. It could be you may not be able to go to the gym, but you just start to take a walk. It could be that instead of 16 hours of sleep, you drop down to 12 hours. You start to see those improvements in many different facets of your life. And you start to see where you can come out of it. And I know it's a very challenging for people to do that alone. And that's where my kind of job comes in, is trying to help people navigate through those times in their life to help them be better for themselves in the long run. So that's kind of my coming to life experience moment.
This is going to be good.
This is going to be such a good conversation. Phillip, I wrote down signs and symptoms because I think one of my biggest frustrations in this work is we're like, even there, there's mental health first aid and all these other programs out there. I feel like they always go into like these surface level signs and symptoms of how can you tell if your teen is feeling depressed? And I'm like, well, those always sound just like a teen, right? They're moody. Well, cool. I don't know I have taught middle schoolers. I can guarantee you, I have not met a single middle schooler who's not moody, right? And so some of your signs and symptoms were very nuanced, very detailed, and your awareness of those is I think, really a need in this position to help us really see like, oh, my hands are getting sweaty. Those very nuanced things that we just don't pay attention to as humans. The other thing too that kind of resonated with me with what you were saying is, I think one of the most challenging parts of being human is trying to figure out what's normal versus not. And I use this lens. My daughter is almost 9, and she had a paper cut the other day, and she was like, "Mom, is it really deep or is it not that deep?" And I was like, I mean, it's pretty normal, right? But I realized that I was like, that's such a bizarre question. But I realized like she's trying to figure out like, is this worth me crying about? Is this something I need stitches? Is this something I should put mud into and just ignore? Trying to figure out. And I think if we utilize that thought process and we apply it to really big, hard things, do I belong on this planet with other people? And do I have a home, and do I feel connected? And do I have, these deep relationships? What is normal? There's such a spectrum of our humanity where we go through trying to figure what is our normal, what is, so I appreciated that perspective in your story. Thank you. All right. So you want to go ahead and let's talk a little bit more. You work with individuals and couples in your work. You really help with emotional healing and healthy communication. What are some maybe big myths that you see in your work that people experience in their relationships? Or what are some myths that are your takeaways in your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of say very often, and I keep it very simple. This could be working with a VP of a bank, or this could be working with somebody who's on the autism spectrum with an IQ of 76. It really doesn't necessarily matter that much, because I like to communicate things that are helpful for that person to understand at the level that they can receive it. And so for anybody, I often say a feeling is just a feeling, and a thought is just a thought. It doesn't necessarily make it something that you have to do something about. And so if you have a feeling, accept that and explore it. So when you're dealing with those, let's say, those middle schoolers, and the example that you brought, which is the paper cut, instead of trying to solve the problem for that person, I would aid in their curiosity of that. So you got a paper cut. Well, what do you think? Do you think it's deep? Do you think that it's only shallow? Did you think it would only hit the dermaplane? Like, what do they think? Because especially as parents, I understand the protective nature of stuff, but especially as a child, whether that's in school as they are learning things, or whether that's learning things about life through those feelings and those thoughts and interpreting experiences through their body, their changes. Understand that I don't need to solve the problem for them. It's already a safe space. If they were bleeding out, I'm pretty sure I would take them to the emergency room. Right. I don't let them go out into traffic right away. I don't let them go, go near a dog that's behaving aggressively. You need to appropriately let yourself as a parent or as somebody as a guide, let them experience that. So aid in their curiosity to say, what is that for you? Because a cut to you may just be surface level if maybe you work in the garden a lot. Maybe you touch roses a lot. Maybe you work out, so you get calluses on your hands or something. So you may be used to it with you, but for somebody, that may be super detrimental to them. And who are we to determine that as teachers and counselors and therapists, or any type of person that is trying to help somebody and aid in their processing? So I do that as well when it comes to emotions and thoughts, whether that's individually or with couples, is I don't solve the problems for them. I let them aid in their own world about that curiosity. Does that comment mean more to you, is more hurtful than if that comment was said to somebody else. If that traumatic instances doesn't really do anything to another person, maybe it's super impactful for your life. Maybe your partner's not saying good morning to you and not offering you a cup of tea when they get their tea is a bothersome to you, or that bully at school that is just pushing you around makes you feel some type of way about yourself and it makes you isolate. Who are we to determine that? So I create a space for people to share that with me and aid being that voice in their head with that curiosity when it comes to their feelings, thoughts, and behaviors are affecting them in a negative way, and say, how do we tweak that so you can have a better experience? Not avoid it, but manage yourself as you go through it.
I also think that we so often apply our own lived experience onto others, and then we short their ability to actually process on their own too. And I think questions are always such a great way for us to help people process their hard emotions without imposing our own beliefs, our own thoughts, or lived experiences into them. And I'm going to give you a quick example. With that situation with my son, we were sitting at the table last night talking, and he started to get heated about something, and he was like texting with this girl, and he was like, I'm going to do this. And both my husband and I were like, whoa, that's not how you should react. Like, why are you angry? Like, you should be, there for your friend, regardless of who she is, and support her. But I realized I have to name that emotion for him. He's not understanding. He's hurt, right? So the whole like hurt component, I saw his eyes kind of light up and I was like, are you hurt right now? Is that why you're asking that or thinking that way? And I think he realized in that moment, like, oh, I am projecting my hurt in my friend's, because let me go back. He was upset because the girl was texting another boy. So he was hurt then. Then he felt hurt because he felt like he made a mistake calling 911 because adults reacted in a way, right? And so once I named that, he was then able to take himself out of the situation and say, oh, like there's two things here. I need to be here for my friend who's going through a mental health crisis. I don't need to be angry at her for going through that, right? I need to just support her, make sure she is here tomorrow. And then after that hurt, in that conversation, not hurt, after that conversation is resolved, then I can come to my lesser problem of my hurt and say, hey, it really hurt me when you texted him, right? It really hurt me when you were not loyal to me. But really, like when you don't separate the problems or don't help people process, it gets so muddled together that we are unable to really name what's causing what emotion and how should I handle each one of those things. But I think honestly, as friends and people that care about others, the best thing we can do is ask those questions to help them really figure out what they're feeling. What is it towards? Who is it towards? How should I problem solve it? And that to me, like, is how we show up as good supports. And I, even with my own kids, I'll ask, do you want advice or do you want me to listen?
Absolutely. And we don't question why. So even with couples and adults and even with children, I understand that people's natural instinct is to be curious to ask the question why, but I would give you a nice nugget going forward for anybody is don't ask the question why, because the question why is a question that no matter what the intent is, it makes somebody anxious and defensive. And as well as the answer will never be good enough because you can always continue to ask the question of why. So whether you're in an emotional state and wanting to know why your student is isolating, why they're being so quiet, why your spouse is being so distant, why somebody made this decision, be curious. Curious questions is breaking down the why into what and how. If you break it down, it allows somebody to not feel judged, defensive, and anxious, and it helps them find those answers of, again, maybe a label to a feeling. This particular circumstance makes me feel this type of way. This type of thought is more associated with this type of circumstance. But if you judge it, and you make somebody defensive and anxious, it's very hard for people to learn and figure that out for themselves.
This is literally why I'm on this mission to hashtag be human, because the judgment of it all changes our emotions and our trajectory and how we problem solve. And like none of that is helpful or what we need to be doing.
Not at all. And I understand that it's a natural word that we learn as we've learned language to ask. But if you really have observed it and sat back, you would say, hey, me asking specific type of questions helps me gather a lot more information, and it does something more to somebody else compared to when I specifically ask these type of questions, what people's reactions and responses are, and then where it puts me as well. And if my intent is to try to help somebody process, they don't need to necessarily be judged about that. So it's kind of like, hey, if that is how you feel, that is how you feel. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to act on it. So
There's a
having
difference.
children and children and adults and adolescents process that and say it's just a feeling. A feeling is your body's response to what is happening around you. We label it in order for us to understand it, but that's all it is.
It's
And so
communication.
it's with yourself.
Mhm.
It's a communication with
Exactly.
yourself. Like, so now you're reminded, hey, when this girl texts somebody, I feel betrayed. I feel isolated. I feel compartmentalized. I feel forgotten about. I don't feel loved. Great. Because when there are other people, I don't know, when they get older, their boss probably does that to them, or a friend leaves them hanging. It's going to be represented in many different type of ways. You know now how to handle it because it's not the whole pie. It's only part of the pie because you don't always feel like that. It's only in that circumstance, environment, and experience that you feel like that.
And I think the asking questions component too, Philip,
It's
is
so
like,
important.
it's so important, but it's also building such an essential habit inside of our beings that I always think of it as like the equivalent of, and I don't know why, I feel like I said this in the last conversation we had, podcasting conversation too, like sleep hygiene, sleep training our babies, I always say is very similar to learning mental health stuff in certain ways. And like, you know, when we have a baby cry it out, our goal is to not torture our baby. The goal is not for our baby to just cry until they get so sad that they can't, you know, they just have to go to sleep. The goal is that they figure out through the crying process, okay, mom's not coming for me, dad's not coming for me. What can I do to solve this problem on my own? Let me find my thumb, this blankie, roll on my belly, whatever. Same thing with our kids. I think that we have become the kids like security blankets and resolved so much of their mental health work for them, giving them the answers on how to resolve the things versus allowing them to feel that discomfort and figure out like, how can I navigate this? And I think the only way I have gotten through my own mental health challenges is truly asking myself questions on repeat. Aaron, is this thought productive? Aaron, is this thought something that's going to help you in life? Is this noise? Is there a better way to think about this that will be healthier for you? Is this really what you're feeling, or is it something else that's causing you to feel this way? If you're having sweaty palms right now, is it because there's a hard emotion that's brewing up inside you that you need to think about, right? And I think that the questions we ask ourselves are like the blanket and the thumb and the whatever with our babies and sleeping, right? Like something to help them. And I think innately as humans, we are so not self-aware too. So anytime we can bring it back to that self-awareness, I think we are always going to have a better outcome, whatever it is that we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just, again, adding to the natural curiosity of being a child. Like the first time that you saw an egg and the first time you broke the egg and you see what's inside of the egg and the texture and the smell of it, a healthy egg versus a rotten egg, how it can be cooked differently. You know, like even as adults, it really doesn't change. And sometimes I'm bringing back very fundamental children-like things to adults who have had 20, 25 years of marriages. And I'm just like, yeah, because you stop being curious about each other. And so that reinforcement of, yes, it doesn't look like a baby crying at 4 a.m. in the morning anymore. But guess what? your text messages look short. It could be that you are socially isolating very often in different rooms. It could be that the way that your speech pattern is, the volatility in your voice, your tone, your choices. Like, it's not different than a child. It's just now you're playing an adult game, but it looks differently, because what you really is that this is a representation of a mirror of you. And it's also the ability to connect with your inner child. And so one thing I often say to anybody, but mostly with couples dealing with each other and families, do not reinforce a behavior that you don't want to see, and reinforce a behavior that you do want to see. So don't perpetuate your child throwing a tantrum and giving them what they want. So it's nothing different than two adults. If I don't like the behavior, I'm not going to reinforce it. That's called a boundary, because it compromises me and it reinforces to think that you think that this is going to be healthy for us or myself moving forward. And that's not true. But when you do something right, your speech, your tone, your behavior, your thoughts, your consideration, your empathy, I'm going to say, I like
I
that,
appreciate
do more
that.
of it,
Yep.
and people miss that part. And sometimes they have to come back to being aware of that. And I help with that too.
I also, and sorry, I know Darren he's like chomping at the bit to ask you some questions. But I also think one more thing, and I know I used this example before on the podcast, but I always say it's like in the nuances of our, unspoken communication, right? And like, I always use the example, if my husband, I'm starving and he brings home a pizza for dinner, and in the door, he drops the pizza, I might be like, ugh. And he might be like, oh my gosh. And he would then take in all that guilt and shame and be like, I am so sorry I dropped that pizza. If I don't have the awareness of myself to be able to say, it's not you, I'm not mad at you, I'm upset that the pizza's on the ground because I was really hungry, then that goes uncommunicated. And I see this in couples all the time, where the projection of their emotions lands on their partner only because nobody was identifying it and just calling it and naming it, right? And so it's really in those nuances, like you were saying, it's the tone. It's did I roll my eyes without even realizing it? My husband will call me out and I'll be like, I didn't roll my eyes. He's like, yes, you did. I'm like, damn it, right? It's those nuances that I think children struggle with, and then it becomes habit, and then we don't even realize them. And I think sometimes as adults, we struggle with putting each other in our places, unless it's like a partner. But I, maybe wouldn't say to Darren, why did you just roll your eyes? I mean, I would, because I'm very blunt like that.
You would. You'd be like,
but people in general don't, right?
No, absolutely. And I think this is a skill that you can learn no matter who you are. It actually is helpful for everybody, is learning about reflections instead of questions. So a reflection is literally what it is. It's a mirror. It's just saying back what somebody's feeling and thinking. So if a child is saying, I don't like that, instead of asking, why don't you like that? Say, you don't like that. Reflections scientifically have been shown to open up for more information than questions in and of themselves, no matter how good the question is. And so it allows people to figure out for themselves. And if you use this skill very often from child to adults, you will start to see you can pull a lot more information from people without having to compromise yourself. Because again, you're not asking or involving yourself into the situation. You're just holding up a mirror. And so you're not going to feel exhausted. You're going to feel like you communicated well, and people are going to feel validated for what their experience and their feelings are. But if you make it about I instead of just them, then it's not going to get necessarily anywhere. So it's like, you felt bad, the pizza fell on the floor. I feel bad because I'm still starving. Like, it's us. It's not a you. It's not a problem.
It's a situation.
It's just a situation. And again, it's just a feeling.
Yes.
Like, that's all it is. It doesn't mean you have to act on it or blur it out.
It will pass.
You have to think about, hey, what is my response and reaction to any human being? What is the bigger picture of what I'm going to do? My self-awareness of that, but more awareness of them. What is going to be the outcome for us? And for them, do I shut my partner down after a long day of being considerate, getting me something that could have been? Or am I going to make them feel shame and guilt and get on them because they tripped coming in through the door? there's a price and a cost to everything. And some people just need somebody to help them see those type of things and bring it to the table.
Well, we do have a bunch of questions, but I actually like where the conversation's going. So I'm just looking at them, and there's so many good ones in here. Okay, so for someone who's stuck in an unhealthy relationship pattern, potentially for much of their life, what's a tool they could use to start shifting things? Like, where do they start? I don't do good with relationships. Where do they start?
I would say start writing things down. That's something that I recommend for everybody. There's a different part of the brain when you start to write things down. And we're not talking on a tablet. I'm talking about old-fashioned pen or pencil to paper. Get this stuff out of your mind. You will see that when you just dump it, it ain't got to be within the lines. When you start to dump it, you start to map out a lot of things, because you maybe have a really good thought and you're like, oh, I need to attend to that. But in the circumstance that you forget about it hours later. So write it down. And then when you look back and say, what is my part in this? Because a lot of people want to blame that their relationships aren't working out for them because of other people. But what I'm saying is that no, once you become your own self-sufficient adult, most of the time, your relationships are a representation of you. And so what are you deciding and what are you responsible for when it comes to these type of choices? And if a pattern is starting to occur with specific type of characteristics, reactions, responses that are brought out of you with specific types of people, then you get to sit back and say, you know what, that's still 100% my responsibility. So writing it down makes you actually look at yourself on paper. What thoughts and feelings and behaviors am I doing? It's not working for me. Okay, now that I've gotten that, what is my responsibility? What do I need to be accountable for? And then what things do I need to implement for myself to determine that the next time there's an opportune moment, I can be able to discern better for myself whether this is something I want to take on or use for its own purpose or leave be. But a lot of people don't take that. They just kind of let things come to them and then blame outward people for why the circumstances and outcomes became what they became.
Now you're speaking my language, Philip. I'm like, yes, accountability is like one of my things. I mean, honestly, it's hard to not look in this world right now and not be like, holy cow, can adults take some accountability in this world? I'm going to tell you some, and this is like so deep, Darren doesn't even know, and he knows most things about me, I think, at this point. But I actually had some infidelity in my marriage. And in that process, I had to look and figure out what parts I played in that, even though I was the one who was not, cheating or anything. But I had to very much say like, oh, I built some walls and I pushed you away and you were looking for somebody else to help you with some of your trauma, because I was like, nope, not helping you and not being a partner. And I think it was honestly like one of the hardest things I've done was take some ownership in that. But it's also one of the most liberating things, because it did help me to really see it really is two people that come to anything, really. I think I get stuck sometimes in like, I'm not going to own your stuff. I will own my own stuff. And sometimes that upsets people when I'm like, let me just really spell out what you did for you. But I will always own mine in that same way. The other thing too, that I think writing things down, I mean, there's so much science about it crossing that center line. And again, I've said this before and I'll say this on repeat, not just typing. I have the worst handwriting in the world. I hate writing. I've had this back and forth with my therapist a million times. And she's like, if you don't write it, it's pointless. So yes, writing it down will help cross that center line. But I also think that when we process the things in this way, it helps us to find triggers. And I think like when I was thinking this question, my example, I would say my suggestion would be understand what trauma triggers are in general. Understand what they are for you, and then continue to explore that for forever. And so I'll use an example. Like I recognize I was driving and I've always been an aggressive driver because I grew up in DC. It's just what we do. We don't use turn signals. We drive with our elbows out. And I was driving the other day and I was like, Erin, why are you so pressed to be at the front of this? And I realized it's because at one point in my life, I was 16 coming home from work, going across the 1-lane bridge. It was dark, like 10 p.m. and 1-lane bridge. So there's a light on either side. Our light turned green. We start going. There's one car in front of me and only us. That's it. We get about 80% across that bridge and the guy stops and he gets out of his car. So I am 16. I'm like, holy shit, I don't know what to do. I reverse down the road and I take another way home. But I realized like I've had, and I probably could pull out like 5 more other like traumatic driving events, but I realized I want to be first in that pact of cars just so I can just have control in some way. Not because I actually like then drive like a nut after I'm in front of the cars. I just like can't, it's hard for me to like have cars in front of me. I don't know why, but I think it's very much a trauma trigger. And I think again, these trauma triggers show up in such nuanced ways. They're, why I raise my voice when something happens in my marriage, or why I am stressed when my kids do something, right? These triggers show up in sometimes like the moments we least want them to show up because they're the most important moments for us, or we have the most emotional tie to those moments. And I think that when we can start to notice them, we can start resolving them and they can stop defining us. And I think they show up more in marriages and relationships than any other relationship, romantic relationships than any other relationships we have. So that would be my suggestion. Try to examine like, what are your trauma triggers? How do they show up? What in our lives has made us shut down in certain ways or react in certain ways? And how can we start moving past those? Stop having them stifle us.
I agree with that. I think something that if you were a client, how I would look at it is that you think that a different way to control will change how you feel, but you already have control because you're already in your own car.
Yeah. Yep.
So some people don't realize that you, and again, even with your feelings, like often I use the metaphor of you have the lock inside of the door. The lock is not on the outside of the house. So anything that you let bother you, nobody can make you feel any type of way. Like nobody can make you think any type of way or make you do anything. It's the lock, it's inside of the door.
I think our thoughts are the only thing we can control in this life. I have mentioned this to numerous people.
No, I don't think so, because that's
what else can we control besides our thoughts?
You can control what you do about the thoughts.
The response.
That's why the response to the thoughts, the behaviors. That's what the behaviorists came up with.
But I think that's still part of your
thoughts. After the subconscious is that no, because you could do things a lot because it doesn't take a lot of brain power to pick this up. I didn't think about picking this up. I just picked it up. So you don't always have a thought with what you do. So that's what the subconscious is kind of do. We're kind of motivated to just do things, but we don't think about doing things. So what happens is when you use that frontal lobe to process your thinking, you're now more inclined to make a better judgment of behavior or action based on the outcome that you are trying to have. And if you had a lot of negative ones, you have to change what you do. So I can talk about your feelings all day long and your trauma and your mom and your dad and your hierarchy of needs and your genetics and do this test and that assessment. At the end of the day, no matter how much information I give you as a client or as a person, if you don't do anything about it by an action, it's nothing. So you're going to have thoughts just like we're riding down in a car playing Grand Theft Auto. And I'm like, dang, I really want to run over these passengers right now. That's an intrusive thought. We all have those, right? Like, bro, I got to go move, but I can't do that because I'll go to jail. So you're going to have thoughts. And that's why I said feelings are just feelings. A thought is just a thought. It could be the most heinous, evil, weird, strange, unorthodox thought that you've ever had. It doesn't mean that you have to do anything about that. So your behavior and your actions are the things that you control. Your body's response is what your feelings are going to be, and your thoughts are just what your mind has created as an interpretation to what you're perceiving. But it doesn't mean that you have to do anything about that. So the only thing that you can control is what you do, not what you think about and not what you feel. And to try to tell somebody that they can have the ability to do that would be lying to them, because it's not true.
The idea of this conscious versus the subconscious is something I think about a lot lately, honestly, because I think about like racism, misogyny, like all of these things. It's not something that's so in your face. I mean, it can be, but I think a lot of these people who are like, I see no color, are trying to say like, I treat everybody equally, whatever. But the truth of the matter is like, we need the nuance of the subconscious in those moments to actually be something that they focus on. And that's where they're stuck. It's not, we had a electrician who came to our house, and he only looked at my husband, which is funny because like I'm a handy human in my house. I do tile work. My husband was like, you could be speaking Japanese to me. I have no idea what you're saying. And I even said this to the guy. I'm like, it's me, but it's that nuance. Like he's not walking away thinking, oh, I was being super misogynistic, but because of eye contact, that was our takeaway. Right. And so I think sometimes like if we can, and I think that we can teach ourselves to focus on our nuanced patterns of thought patterns and actions and things like that, become more conscious of them so we can stop making some of those choices, right? But I do think like the idea of the subconscious versus the conscious is such a, we can't say like, oh, 80% of our work is done in our subconscious and 20% is our conscious, because I think you can work to actually make your subconscious more of your conscious. It just depends on how much of that work you're willing to do. But I think a lot of like the actions and thoughts is landing in that space for me of like, I think it really just it depends on if you're consciously aware of it or subconsciously aware of it and where you are in that spectrum of moving through that process,
Yeah. And I think what I do fundamentally is that to sum up my profession, is I help people process change. And so one of the things about change is you have to see it as a problem. Like I can't determine what you need to change. And so if somebody is in that realm, they may not see that it's a problem, so they don't want to change. Now, if you, as the person who was maybe interpreting the negative message, what it may have been like, it's saying, okay, this person doesn't think that it's a problem, because maybe I'm really not determining that it's a ill intent or misogynistic thing directly towards me, but as a person who is observing this behavior, I have control about what I do. I can make a scene with this person and cause him to be stressful, which may affect my house. Or it's just like, bro, I'm not going to see this guy again. Even if it was, I'm not going to see this guy again. I'm only going to call him when I'm solving a problem. Do I need to make a scene and compromise myself, get myself anxious, stressed out, loud, turning red, my blood pressure is up, to make a point for somebody who doesn't see a problem?
And you're creating a problem in their minds.
And the problem is my HVAC is out.
In their minds, you're creating the problem. There was no problem
if
before.
They're not ready to change or they don't see a problem, then you can't do anything about it. So that's why I come in and say, if you're in my office, I didn't go to your house to say, hey, do you want to do therapy? No, there's a problem. And even if you speak about it and say, it's not a big deal, what are you talking about? You had so much motivation. You called me, made a consultation, filled out the intake, showed up on time, drove in your car, paid me this much, and yeah, nothing's wrong.
But change is so hard for people. Change is the most uncomfortable thing, I think, for us.
But staying the same is a price, though, too.
Exactly, Darren. That's a great question. And that's where stole this from Jordan Peterson, where he said, it's really hard to make somebody look forward to something when they're not in the actionable stage. When they're in the contemplative, pre-contemplative stage of change, you can sit there and go, well, what is the cost of staying the same. Because there is a cost of staying the same, but we don't need to necessarily take you to where you may go. Because sometimes it's like, based on the history, what are you noticing and conscious about the results, about how you think, how you feel, and especially what you do? If that continues, where would that lead you going down? That in and of itself can be motivational towards somebody, because now they're like, I don't want to go in that route. Now they're more motivated to do this. And you have to think about changes like this. The reason why it's uncomfortable is because people have not been brought up to understand the relationship with negative emotions. People don't change unless it's negative emotions involved. Because guess what? If there were positive things happening in your life, you wouldn't want to change it. So people don't understand that, is that no, change is only motivated by negative feelings. It can't be done with positive, because it doesn't mean I need to change anything. I'm chilling. I'm cool.
Okay, so this is super fascinating because I'm going to bring in one more element to this. So I have to set the stage a little bit, but I've been in an ongoing residual disagreement with my mom. I haven't talked to my father in several years. My mom at least was willing to go to like family therapy with me and work. So we're still working at it. But my dad took me off of the will because I used the word boundaries once. And so years ago. Fine, whatever. But my mom this past week sent me an article in the middle of the night, and I happened to be up, and it was something like how therapy talk is ruining relationships. And I was like, Mom, that's first an opinion article. So we had a couple back and forth at like 3 a.m. And she's like, well, but it's how I feel. I'm like, yeah, but I mean, I feel opposite. I think like the more we have a basic understanding of these things, the more we can continue to heal our society and get further in this mental health realm, get on more of a similar playing field, and all start doing the work together. I think we should be using more therapy talk all the time, personally. I know I'm biased, but I said to her, I said I could find 20,000 articles that literally could tell you the exact opposite, that would support what I believe. And I was like, you just like this article because it confirms your biases. And her response was, well, so be it, ... And that's where we left it. I said, okay, fine. If that's all you want out of society and out of worlds, fine. But I think that, coming back to this idea of change, I think we have this extra layer now where we have this discomfort with change. We are in these like echo chambers where they're confirming, where all I'm getting is my biases confirmed to stay rooted in what I believe. 9% of our globe, or 9% of Americans believe the earth is flat. Like, this is where we're kind of getting to in society, where that change is so uncomfortable. We are grounding ourselves in this, like, our beliefs, and finding the things to confirm our beliefs so we don't have to change. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's a challenging spot to be in. Darren, did you want to add something to that?
Confirmation bias is a real thing. Like, what you look for, you're going to find. I can go to the fanciest restaurant we're typically in Denver, and if I have the negative lens of I'm going to find something wrong, I'm going to find it. So it's like, what we look for, we will find, which is this confirmation bias. Like, well, see, I found evidence. Well, did you look at the other side of the evidence? And I'm not getting into whether everybody should be in therapy or some people should.
No, absolutely. You're right. That confirmation bias is real. That red car theory is real. If you're looking for trouble, looking for the devil, looking for a problem, you're going to go find it. I think, again, it gets back to, you have a bias to think that they need to change, instead of, again, getting back to that relationship question you asked me earlier about how do people navigate finding better relationships for themselves. And what I'm trying to say is, look at you. I'm Democrat. I'm not trying to convince a Republican. If I'm atheist, I'm not trying to convince a Muslim or Catholic or a Methodist about religion. If I am a flat earther, I'm not convincing somebody that the earth is round. Like, it exhausts you. So you need to find what it is that maybe you are petrifying yourself about. And the only thing that you can control is your own response to that. So you don't need to go on Twitter and talk to strangers. You don't even need to talk to your own mom if you feel like it's compromising you. And girl, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I got a job to do. Like, I'm not talking about this, bro. Like at 3 o'clock in the morning, setting a boundary with your own mother. Or maybe you notice that I don't know, maybe you're misogynistic talking to an extreme feminist and you're trying to talk about this problem with this gender war that's going on. If they're not going to listen, it is up to you to control your own actions. And it's not something that you only do. It's also about what you open up your mouth about. Those are things. And if you see somebody who's not open, not wanting to change, not curious, it is your job not to enforce it. And so you don't have to talk to them. Like, nobody has to answer a question if somebody just asks them. You can stay quiet. If you don't need to do anything, I don't care if people are trying to pull you to do something physically, you don't have to do it. And so that's why it gets back to, this is more about you than it is about anybody else. And if they don't want to change and they don't want to listen to therapy talk, then don't talk about therapy talk. Like, get somebody who goes, that wants to therapy talk. If I'm talking to a person from the down south, 45 years old, with only a GED and an IQ of 95, I'm not using big psychological words to try to relate to that person. That doesn't make sense. I'm not trying to make you come to my world to help you understand something. I need to understand it with yours. And so if people are in that gray and have a natural curiosity about something, I would say, how are we more alike than we are different? How am I more alike to the opposite of what my beliefs and my values are to somebody's who may not be? You know why? Because we're all human.
The outgroup similarities is greater than the
differences.
That too. Like, I'm a Dodger fan.
Okay, right.
I live in Colorado. We have Rockies around here.
Got it.
But I see a person in a Dodger shirt and I automatically assume they're a good person. More people get murdered at Dodger Stadium every year or every periodic amount of time than I think any other stadium, because it's like, not all Dodger fans are good people. Like, sometimes they beat Giants fans to death in the parking lot.
Well, I never knew that, but yeah, like, we just assume.
But
that.
I assume that they
Yes.
are. It's like, I'm making a judgment based on the color of their T-shirt and a logo on it, Dodgers or otherwise.
I think Mama was right when they said, what happens when you assume? You know, you make an ass out of you and me. So I think that's the problem. And that's why you have to stay curious about people.
Again, coming back to questions and how powerful it is to really not just assume, but ask.
Ask. That's it. Like, you don't know. Like, you may think, and you make good educated guesses. Maybe experience and wisdom have taught you some discernment. That's fair. But it's also like, these people, small to large, know themselves better than you will ever know them. Like, you have to think about that. Even a child knows what it wants and what it needs to satisfy itself. And such as an adult, it just looks differently where they are in the stage of life. They know themselves. They know what they want. They know what they crave. My foot's itchy. I'm hungry. I have an attitude. I'm pissed. It's chemicals. I'm upset. They know themselves. This is what I do to survive. Like, they know themselves better than you ever will. But if you don't stay curious and you keep them defensive at bay or judged on, you will never find the answers.
So I really wanted to ask you, because you're a couples counselor as well.
Yes.
I got one more question for you. And
Yeah.
it's in that realm. There's this myth that couples therapy is for relationships that are broken. You see it as preventative care, and I would agree with you. What would you say to a couple who thinks, we don't fight that much, we don't need therapy? I really want to know what you got to say.
Let's see how long that lasts for them. You know,
Good
they have to
luck.
make. Yeah, you're right. You have to make decisions where it's just like, I understand part of my career is going to be advocating for what it is that I do. I don't really sit there and say, come to therapy, bro. Who's going to come to see me is going to come to see me. I'm not going to convince you to do something you don't want to do. And that's why I explain it like, bro, I just help people process change. That could be with studies, relationship, communication, diet, exercise, finances, there's different ways to help with change that can solve problems. It doesn't always have to be talk therapy. Like, no, sometimes me being with a kid and throwing a football is more therapy than us talking about how he may be feeling. He just needs a space to chill with a bro and play ball. Sometimes with a woman, sometimes she's talking for the full 55 out of 60 minutes because she just needs a place to rant. And I would rather her rant to me than, again, go take that home to a man that I know that isn't going to care.
I said that today. I was like, I'd rather you do it with me than take it home.
Then take it someplace else. And so to me, with couples, it's like, even in medical sense, every single doctor worth their salt knows statistically preventative care is a lot cheaper than aftercare. But there's no money to be made in capitalism if we do preventative care. So we understand that part, but it's the same thing in therapy or a relationship where it's like, no, part of it is preparing like an insurance about things that might happen or probably will happen because you are going to change based on life, age, and circumstances, no matter what the case may be like, because new decisions come with new chapters and new experiences. And so there is a preventative thing to couples counseling to say, hey, we're thinking about moving. How are we going to handle this? You're going to be in my space, unorganized, still got to go to work. There's boxes everywhere. Hey, we're bringing a child in. She's going to go through stuff postpartum. How is that going to do with you? You're not going to get laid. How is that going to feel? Like, that's going to come. Like, I'm making a job career decision. How is that going to affect finances, which affects date night, which affects getting laid because you're not going out. So you're not getting, so it's a domino effect. And so with
100%.
me, it's a very holistic approach to say, hey, we can do the pre thing. And it's also of, if I already have this commitment to somebody to fulfill that lifelong role, especially if you talk about a marriage based on the spiritual vows that you take, what could be the best experience that I can give to this person? And there is always an improvement of how I treat them and what I communicate with and what I bring forth to them. So I can always continue to learn about that. And so if you went to a counselor to help you with that, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a problem to come.
Let me pose the question ever so slightly differently. What about when one partner wants to go and one's like, I don't want to go for whatever reason they don't want to go? Maybe that's a better question. I understand the free will part. People aren't going to do what they don't want to do. But like, how do you help a couple come together on that? Or like, well, I don't know. I guess good luck.
Well, that's a good one. I mean, I would see them more, ironically, we could talk about it as being like men are being dragged more openly because women want to talk about their emotions. I think we can concur that very well. So usually, and that doesn't mean it's always.
I was going to say, I do see the opposite as well.
Yes. And it's great that it's becoming like that. And then monogamous relationships aren't the only, it's not just man, woman, it's woman, woman, they, them, groups of people. It's a lot changing. So, if you talked about somebody willing to do that, it's again, what's the price or the cost? I can't determine that. I don't have a straightforward answer for that. But the cost is I'm forcing somebody to do something that they don't want to do. Well, how does that make me feel when somebody forces me to do something that I don't want to do? One, you're probably not going to give your best effort to the outcome because you don't trust it. But it's also like, if you're there for your partner, and again, that stage of change is not the same. Maybe you're ready to take action, but there's still more pre-contemplative, speculative of what therapy may be like. I don't need another man telling me my own problems. I don't need to open up about my feelings about this. What is he or she going to do for me that I haven't talked to you about already? They're just going to repeat back what we said to each other before. Yes, but the problem is that you still have an issue, and it's almost like it doesn't have to be straight up an event happening. It could be death by 1,000 cuts. But you're starting to think, no, there's something that could not be its best, or there's things that are starting to add up that when we compartmentalize it, don't address it, don't talk about it anymore, don't bring it to the table, make excuses for life happening. All right, when it happens, cool. It may not be tomorrow, but it's going to come. So, but you can't force somebody to do something they don't want to do. And so respect your partner.
I think one of the things I value about my partner is that ability to sometimes help me get outside my head and have a different perspective. And I do think you're right, like proactive versus reactive. I will be transparent in my relationship. I've been with my husband for, I don't know, 21 years, almost 22 years, maybe.
Congratulations. Nice.
Thank you very much. We've been married since we were 23 years old. And I will say that we started couples counseling before we even got married. I've been in therapy since I was 13. So to me, it's not anything, there's so many stigmas and so much of that. I felt very similarly where I was like, oh my gosh, we're not even married and we're going to marriage counseling and we're not even married. Like, looking back on it, I would 100% suggest it though. The other thing I think too to put in this is people will ask me a lot, well, you've been together for a very long time. What is the secret to that? And I truly believe that trauma is part of the human experience. I don't think trauma is something any of us get to escape before leaving this planet. We all bring trauma to relationships, period. I personally, for our relationship, we both had to do really intensive mental health work and really resolve a lot of our childhood traumas before we could come together as a couple and really do this in a adult kind of responsible way, not screaming and not, being triggered and all these other things. And I think that truly being proactive versus reactive has helped us get there, could have helped us a lot further to get there quicker if we had stuck with it. And I think the other thing to mention too is that people have different needs in relationships. And I think a lot of women, again, coming back to this, like what you both were saying is you see women dragging men. I think emotional safety is something that is an essential for women. And it's not an essential for men, necessarily. Not always. I think there are definitely a lot of men more now that are seeking that emotional security. But I do think that it's important to say, if this is my partner and they are seeking emotional safety and they are not having that right now, I should come into this relationship hoping, just like if it was physical safety, we should want that for our partners and in that relationship. I value the emotion or the physical safety my husband brings to me. I also value the emotional safety he brings to me as well. But we can talk about that physical safety, but it's hard for us to talk about the emotional safety. But I think if we see it from that perspective, it helps us to see it less of a personal attack. And I think we bring so much childhood trauma into our relationships that we don't mean to, right? We're here and we might start cursing or name calling or hanging up or walking away. And we're not wrong in feeling those, but we need to get here and say, you're not the reason for that. I need to resolve that so that I can actually attend to you as a partner. And I think that's a reasonable thing to ask. I think for me, I had to get to a place with my husband where I kind of had to give an ultimatum in a way where I said, I healed a lot of my childhood trauma and I need you to heal your childhood trauma too, so we can come here and do it together. I'm up here trying to work on that trauma, but you're still down here like hanging up on me and such, I need you to sit here and do this work with me. Otherwise, I don't know if we can get to a better place together, And so again, I come back to that mindset piece of like, and I'm not a therapist. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not having these conversations with adults like you are. But if it was my partner, I would probably express these things of like, even if it doesn't feel like the right solution for you, it is something I need to feel emotionally safe. It is something I need us to do so that I can feel better in this place. And that's what I did do.
So I think, what I held on to from that was coming from the beginning of you speaking was,
proactive versus reactive? No.
more understanding that men's and women's hierarchy of needs romantically are the same. They're just in different orders. So that's one. So I think what some women aren't necessarily societally trained to understand is men are just as emotional. The difference is it's not societally appropriate for men to express it the same way. So you think that it's not the same. Actually, I would find that men are more emotional. One, because their amygdalas are bigger. So usually mammals whose amygdalas are bigger, when it comes to flight, fight, and responses, they react more. So it's just that it's compartmentalized. So something that's helpful is, again, kind of being curious about your man, if that's the circumstance, to say, no, maybe it's not the fact that I'm needing more emotions, it's the fact of there are barriers to him being able to showcase that, and even showcase that to me, even if I don't create even if I am that space of vulnerability and safety for him, maybe he's not allowing that. And I think it's something that men need to be aware of, a women needs as well, because due to their lack of interactions with most of those things for the average man, it's very hard to know how to handle those. Um, Something else that kind of stood out to me when you said that was how you may have those needs for yourself, but it's when you're in a relationship, it's not about you. And a lot of people miss that. This is for somebody else. It's for us. We're coming together. And again, you kind of have to determine based on your own temperament of experiences when somebody wants to change about those type of things. And it may not be on your dime. So you saying that maybe you quoted like, maybe if we did the counseling and we were aware of this quicker, we would have or learned about it before, we would have got there quicker. To me, it's like everybody wants everything to be quick. Not everybody wants everything to be good. And to me, it's like, why would you want it quickly? Because you wouldn't have learned anything.
I guess when I said that, I should clarify, we're good now. So I wanted to get to the good quicker, right? So in 22 years, I always say, I don't know, the first 15 were really challenging. First 13, I don't know. And I think the other thing to name too.
This human process is slow.
I was just going to say, I think it's also fair to name living with other humans is challenging. Cohabitating, being each other's people for all the things, right? Like when marriage was even created, we were living to be like 35. I would have been dead by now, right? So living together and being together for forever was no big deal. Cool, I can do that for a decade or two. That's fine. And now we're going to live together to be 90? Holy cow, that's a long time. So you better get that wet towel off that bed because I'm not doing that for 70 years, right? It changes things. But I also think that, marriage is relationships in general are very complicated because sometimes you expect that person to be all of your friends in one human, and that's not realistic, right? But we expect them to know, like, which friend do I need you to be? Are you going to be my crying friend or my laughing friend or right? And that you expect your partners to kind of just be able to be that friend when you need that friend. So I agree. It is very much like two people coming together and understanding, again, a lot of nuances of like, ooh,
lifetime of learning.
I don't think you're in the place for me to be my joking friend right now. You seem like you're in a different headspace. And let me read this room. And
you need your own life. You need your own friends. And
go get other friends.
Right. No offense. I'm only going to be good for pretty much a day in and day out type of things, but which is that 80%, 85%. But to me, it's kind of like people miss that because I guess there's misinterpretations of that monogamous, if you're doing more of a heritage, more religious purpose of what you are combining this relationship with this other person for. But no, you need to have your own authenticity in your own life. And so if she's not this and he's not that, okay, they're there for most of the things, but I need to go find that someplace else. And some people, again, the reason why you keep getting let down, and especially when I'm dealing with anger with people, is because you have an expectation. That's why I said it has to do with you, because you are expecting them to be this type of way. You're expecting them to just understand the first time you say it. You're expecting them to react this type of way based on how you would want them to react. And that's why you keep getting let down. And that's why you keep getting angry and frustrated. This has to do with you, not them. And if you notice that their reactions and responses to you are not necessarily beneficial for you, how do you change yourself in relation to that? Not necessarily put that on my part. That's all you can control. Thank you.
And I think that it's also important to name in this, and correct me if you both are gentlemen, so correct me if I'm wrong. I think that a lot of times it's harder for men to diversify their friends. I have had to, and I think it comes back to like, we have told dudes for the entire history of humanity to not have emotions. So it's really hard, right? I've had to encourage my husband a lot to get in that space, and it has improved our dynamic so greatly because I don't have to carry the weight of his emotional needs.
That last 15% that you don't
100%.
naturally want to fill. You're like, I
Mhm.
don't care about that thing, whatever it is. Go do it with somebody else, and he's better and you're better.
So one of the things in the predicted future that researchers have shown is isolation is going to be a major problem.
It already
And
is. I think
it already
agoraphobia
is.
is
Yes.
at an all-time
It's,
high, and I think we're
yeah,
only at the peak of
it's
that iceberg.
it's going to cause so much mental health issues, and especially with men who necessarily aren't as social and emotionally connective as women. Right, in those type of ways. And so it's very hard for men to connect with other people, and then especially more with men, because men don't necessarily bond with emotions with women, as compared to women. Men bond over things.
Yep.
And
Activity.
so football activities, sports like pool, drinking, whatever the case may be, they bond over things. So again, emotions look very different than for women than it does for men. And so it's the encouragement is, oh, he doesn't have any friends. No, I have two good boys that I'm okay with. And I would rather have two long-term relationships with my boys compared to having 10 or 20 where they're not necessarily as fulfilled. And so maybe I only see them every couple of months. I hang out with them, we talk, and we pick back up right where we left off because life is happening. But that is more important to a man compared to women who, again, crave more emotional connection and get that fulfillment when they socialize with other women.
And we're allowed to. Like, we crave it, but also society has guided us to do this, how to do this from day one. It's something we're allowed to do. We're not shamed for doing. And I think it's one of the biggest ways in which we've really, I think it's inhumane. I think it's every human's rights to be able to know how they feel and how to navigate how they feel responsibly. It's liberating to feel like you're here in that frontal lobe. And yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we should be naming as a society is that it's not the dude's fault. I think a lot of dudes feel like when we talk about this, it's their fault. And I think that it's societies, it's cultures, it's the whole globe has done this. And I think the best thing personally we can do is continue to break down these stigmas. And really, I think emotional intelligence is equally as important, if not more important, than academic intelligence in certain ways. And your ability to formulate, healthy relationships with your kids, your partners, your friends, your neighbors, whatever, right? And not just defaulting to anger, because that doesn't feel good.
Or isolation as well.
Or isolation. Absolutely.
All right. I got to jump in here. This was awesome. We cannot thank you enough for your insights.
We would love to keep talking, but we're out of time.
Yeah, I got you. No, I get it. No, I got you.
I got so many questions. We could just go over like couple stuff because that's one thing we haven't really gotten much to talk about. I'm not even today, but I mean like generally. So maybe we get you to come on back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. If you would like to have me back, I would love to do another episode for sure.
So before we wrap up, there's a bigger question that we always ask at the end. So, Erin?
All right. So, Phillip, if you could rewrite one societal rule about relationships, mental health support, really anything in this conversation that we have had, what would you suggest, or what kind of rule would you rewrite?
If I had to rewrite something, I would not rewrite it or more add it, would be teaching about like curriculum wise in school to children all the way up until high school about emotional intelligence, taxes, and investing. Like if you literally had to teach 3 topics that, again, outside of math, reading, language arts, history, science, biology, whatever, you need to be able to physically and seriously teach about emotions and feelings, and then about taxes, and then about investing.
I'm not going to do taxes and investing, but emotional awareness, yes.
Yes, I would teach about that at every single level where that may occur appropriately for that human being to be able to understand based on the capacity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think if you don't understand your emotions, it's hard to have hard conversations. I think we see, I didn't tell you this, Philip, but my husband is a police officer, a very progressive police officer in our town. And I think the conversations I have seen as an educator are almost identical to the conversations or the situations he has seen with the adult population.
Absolutely.
And that tells me absolutely we need more proactive resources in this way.
People can only operate based on the level of awareness that they have. And so not ridiculing them for something they never understood, why ridicule them? Again, being defensive and making them anxious about, hey, you don't know this. You should have known this. You should have been taught this. That's not true.
Why don't you know that?
Right. I'm teaching 40, 50-year-old, 60-year-old people about their emotions. Like somebody who's lived twice my age. And that's because I've become aware of it and I've taken it seriously to understand it and human behavior. And maybe they're just now learning it, but it's kind of like, that's great because going forward, you can utilize it just like people are learning about other topics that maybe weren't taught in school. So it's okay that at whatever point in time, you may not understand anything because you're not going to learn everything.
But it's never too late to start.
Absolutely. And like you said, like in the beginning, like as a therapist, bro, I you know how many times a day I say, bro, I don't know. Like, I don't know everything. I don't want to know everything. I need to know what I need to know.
But
That's
I can be a
it.
thought
Like,
partner here with you and walk through it together.
I can go find out because I just don't know. So if I don't, some people brought stuff to me, has said psychological words, and I'm like, that's a good word. That's a new type of therapy I didn't know about. Okay, that's a different way to look at it. That's a different metaphor than I've heard because I haven't heard it all. So again, you have to be like a child to people because not everybody knows everything that you know.
Well, and also, like, you know how when you talk to adults, people will oftentimes be like, oh my gosh, I feel like my 16-year-old version of me. And it's like, why did people give me this house and these responsibilities and these kids? And I say all the time, it's probably because when you have trauma, it really does make you kind of go back to those older, stages in your life. And we do feel that way.
That's what trauma is. Trauma is going back to where that moment happened for you, and your body is going to respond like that, and your brain is going to respond like that. So that's what trauma is.
So how can people connect with you if they want to find out more about what you do? And you're licensed in Georgia, correct?
Absolutely. So if you wanted to seek out therapy, I'm able to attend to anybody in person or virtually in the Atlanta metro area. But my mental health coaching business, which is pjqcoachingandconsulting.com, I can see anybody within the world. So if anybody is going through something that they feel that they can't get out of, suffering from negative emotions, and just want a better outcome for themselves and whatever circumstance may be as an individual or even as a couple, then that's where I help with, and I have the free reign to do that. So anybody can contact me or inquire about me at pjqcoachingandconsulting.com.
Wonderful. We're so grateful for you joining us today,
Thank you
Phillip.
so much.
Thank you so much
I had a lovely
for this conversation.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And to anyone who is listening or watching, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on post notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on your favorite podcast directory, please leave us a 5-star review and a rating. If you are an expert in mental health, education, social justice, or just generally want to come chat with us, feel free to email us at unplugged@undomindset.org with Undo Mindset in your subject line. We are always looking to amplify voices just like yours. And don't forget, share this episode with someone who might find it helpful. Getting the word out is really the best way in which you can help support our mission, help us get these resources, tips and tricks, and all this stuff out to as many humans as we can. So we truly appreciate all support. Thank you so much and take care.